Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back. As I'm giving you this little offering today, as I'm giving you this little talk today, it is a spectacular spring day outside. I think still spring. It's what, May 8th. It's not quite summer yet, at least not here in the Twin Cities, but it's very convincingly spring. It's really, really warm and really, really beautiful. And I was digging through my closet and going through some of my sewing supplies. There's a lot of sewing we do in Zen, at least at one point in our practice. So those of us who are afflicted with formality and want to jump through all the little religious hoops that Soto Zen asks of us, we end up sewing, sewing rakusus and robes and that kind of stuff at some point. Some of us, anyway. So I was going through my sewing bag and I found something I thought was missing. And I was so relieved to find it again. And I'm inspired to give this talk. I have some notes that have been waiting for the right catalyst to kind of make them make them all line up and make sense. But I think I found it today when I came across this in my sewing bag, and it was a rakusu, a black training rakusu from many years ago, 15 odd years ago, that my teacher gave me, and that I sewed, and that my teacher gave to me. You sew it, and then you relinquish it to your teacher. And he wrote something for me on it and gave it back to me. And the reason the reason I'm uh, inspired to give the talk today is because a memory came back as soon as I saw this old black rock. So I went, oh, that's where you've been. I haven't seen you for a few months, and I must have put you in my sewing bag when I was sewing somebody's stitches or something, and failed to put you back with the other robes, as I should. Ugh. Anyway, a memory came back, and the memory was of my first trip, my first pilgrimage to South Africa. I went to South Africa in 2015, if memory serves, and a pilgrimage dedicated to exploring truth and reconciliation, the spiritual topics of truth and reconciliation. And of course, they also manifest in our civil lives, our family lives, our cultural lives, our religious lives, right? Truth and reconciliation. And some of you might recognize those two words used together and might already see the connection to South Africa, and the obvious reason why that was chosen as the destination to explore this topic for 3 weeks as we traveled around. Truth and Reconciliation Commission is the name of the post-apartheid board, and an entire process, really, of national healing and justice that was created by many people, but most visibly and most publicly by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who we were fortunate enough to get to spend some time with, get to meet. So I'm distracting myself. That was the pilgrimage that I wore this black rock suit on. I was on pilgrimage, and so I was dressed appropriately, according to Zen standards, at least the Zen standards 15 years ago that I was still investigating and trying on. And so I wore a special black rock suit for that trip, and I wore it throughout. And what I learned was, after about, oh boy, maybe a week. I bet it wasn't even a week. I think it wasn't even a week when I realized that the rules for wearing the robes in Soto Zen, the rules for wearing rakusus and that kind of stuff in Soto Zen, were something that I was going to have to hold a little more lightly when I was in that setting. Um, Hold them a little bit more lightly than what I was used to. And so I will confess to you here that I broke, or at least bent creatively, some of the normal rules for how a rakusu is worn and how it's put on, and places you're supposed to take it and places you are not allowed to take it, restrooms and stuff like that, and the way garments are stacked and it being always on the outside and stuff like that. Because I spent 3 weeks traveling there, and it was a very, very hot country, and there was a lot going on, and there was all sorts of stuff that I just realized I wasn't going to be able to follow the rules quite so stringently as I would be used to doing here in the States. Why does all this matter? It matters because I'm calling this talk The Buddha Made of Glass. And the memory that came back to me when I found this, um, when I found this Raksu was a memory of wrestling with this little traveling robe is really what a Raksu is. It's a less formal version, kind of a traveling robe, or an informal robe. And informal, I have quotes around that because it's exactly the robe, and there aren't two robes. There aren't dressy robes and informal robes. There is only the okesa. There is only the kesa, the robe. So it's a different expression of that of Buddha's robe. Nevertheless, the way that it's treated and the way we're expected to work with it is a little different than if we were wearing a large formal robe. And I was wrestling with this thing outside of a restroom. You're not supposed to wear a robe inside of a restroom, and you're not supposed to wear a raksu inside a restroom. And there was a long line of people, and it was in a crowded airport, if I remember right. And there was no place to put it, and it wasn't obviously a monastery. There aren't hooks outside of a restroom. There isn't an altar outside of a restroom. There are not shelves outside of a restroom. There's no place to do bows, none of that kind of stuff. And what I became aware of was in that moment, was my attachment to all these little rules around religious garments are really getting in my way right now. They're making me stand out. Um, they're calling attention to me, which is not what we're designed to do, right? I want to be as invisible as a pilgrim as I possibly can. And also, I'm getting a little precious about these rules. I'm getting a little strict. I'm getting a little precious. And I remember thinking to myself, you know what? In this setting, in this place, in this time, upaya, the Sanskrit word for skillful, means, right, circumstances change. So the means that might be skillful in this circumstance might not be skillful in another. Upaya just means, what does this moment call for? Right? It's baked right into Buddhism. What does this moment call for? I was going to have to adjust, right? And I was going to need for my practice to get a little rough around the edges, you know, have it be okay that my Zen got a little dirty. And so that was the memory that came flooding back to me, was thinking, God, I'm going to have to let my Zen get a little dirty for the next couple weeks while I'm in this country. And the Buddha made of glass is what I ended up realizing by the time I got home. Um, I had a really pretty fragile practice at that point, and that makes sense. I was still pretty new. My practice is still fragile in a lot of ways. It's still pretty new. It's still pretty new. I've only been doing this 20 years, 25 years, something like that. That's still pretty new. One lifetime, that's still pretty new. 100 lifetimes of practice, that's still pretty new, right? It's also ancient, but it's still pretty new. It takes us a long time, right? It's a long and patient thing, this path, this practice that we hold, right? And what I became aware of is it was pretty fragile. My rules were strict. At that time, the standards I held myself to were very strict. I was cranky easily. I was anxious. Um, I would get tetchy when I had to teach forms. I'd get cranky when people didn't bow correctly, or when they brought a water bottle into the zendo, or when, oh dear, there's a thousand things to get cranky about. If you really want to be a fundamentalist about religious expression, you can find a thousand a thousand things to get fundamentalist about, and a thousand reals to be tetchy and cranky. And when robes were improperly worn, or Roxus touched the back of someone's neck, or there was some little tiny thing, I would get quite angry about that. Usually not publicly. I would hold that to myself. But my point is, um, asking my Buddha to be a little larger and a little less fragile was really an important step for me. So I'm offering it to you today as an idea. All of our practice, it seems to me at the beginning, is kind of made of glass. It's pretty fragile. That's okay. That's not a problem. It's just something to see. And it makes sense, right? That as time goes on, our practice gets a little braver, it gets a little deeper. It's a little more stable. It's a little more able to stretch, right? Stretch and grow. It's not quite so brittle, right? Not quite so fragile, not quite so rigid. It reminds me a lot of what I hear my friends who are parents say about parenting. When they have their first kid, everything is going to be exactly right, and everything's going to be laid out exactly right, and the kid's never going to get exposed to germs, and they're never going to get a shaming message, and we're never going to raise our voice, and that they just get really, really, which makes sense to me. It's just how we want to care for everything. The beginning of spring with the garden, or the beginning of a relationship. I'm never going to do this improperly. I'm going to do this. I'm going to treat this so carefully. There's a beauty to that intention, but there's also an anxiety, right? There's a lot of fear in that too, right? There's not a lot of trust, right? And so they always tell me, these parents, like, oh yeah, after 6 months, after a year, after however long, by the second kid, if they have two, or by the third kid, if they have three, like, yeah, you start to just realize kids are tough. It's okay. We still try hard. It isn't that we stop trying, but our intention is expressed in a little bit less of a anxious, clingy, graspy way. So recognizing that my Buddha was made of glass when I was in Africa there was that kind of a moment for me. Oh, there's a lot of fear. You're freaked out, aren't you? What are you freaked out about? What are you scared of? And so I had to do some work around that. What was the fear about, right? And during that time, the work I was doing with my teacher, sometimes he would say this to me in our private meetings, our private interviews, and sometimes it would show up in uh, talks he would offer for classes, or Dharma talks or something like that. When you would see the people that he was training get precious, that was the word he would use. Like, you're getting a little precious about this. You can kind of understand the way that word was intended to be understood in that setting. It's not that something isn't precious, everything is of infinite preciousness, but like, yeah, we're getting just a little precious around the robes, a little precious around the forms, a little precious around this stuff. But we're getting a little clingy, we're getting a little graspy. And then he told a wonderful story on himself, which was beautiful. Something he did a lot, and an example I'm trying to follow. If you're going to hold something up as an example of what not to do, use yourself, right? Um, he told, and I'm going to probably get it wrong, but this is the way I remember it. So he told the story of being with one of his spiritual communities for a while, was in the Lakota tradition. He studied in the Lakota tradition for a while, and I think I remember the larger setting, but I don't trust it quite, so I'll leave that out. There was just a community meal where everybody sat together and had dinner together, and there was I do remember, there was a formality and there was a ritual element to the meal, and the main course, what was being served, was deer. There was some venison, and at that point, in his life, my teacher was a strict, vegetarian, and no caffeine and no sugar and macrobiotic. I mean, really, 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 really stringent, a very strict, very healthy diet, right? Again, beautiful aspiration and a beautiful effort. No criticism. But he was very reluctant when this deer was being served, and his teacher, um, his Lakota teacher, said, "Don't be too holy to eat the deer. Don't be too holy to eat the deer." And that line has really stuck with me. For many years, I'll think about that. Um, I really can feel that energy in me very strongly. Oh man, the reluctance that my teacher experienced, I can feel that in me. The part of me that imagines there is a purity and an impurity. And boy, do I want to, like all of us, I think, right? You want to lean to the side of the pure. And I don't want to break the rule or do the thing wrong or expose myself to the person, the setting, the song, the meat, the food, the air, something. that I imagine might stain my purity. I mean, this is such a common spiritual impulse. All of us must know this part of ourselves, right? Um, what a beautiful admonition he was given. Don't be too holy to eat the deer. And that was one of his moments of realizing, oh, my Buddha's made of glass. If I think that eating venison is going to break my Buddha, right? He was seeing that in himself. He was telling that story on himself. It was years after it had happened, but his teacher's voice and his teacher's teaching, his message stuck with him, and he offered it to me. He offered it to us, and it stayed with me too, right? Don't be too holy to, and fill in the blank. You can feel that what's necessary here is active discernment. Active discernment, upaya. What is necessary right here? What does enlightenment look like right now? What does love look like right now? What would be kind to this moment, right? I'm a vegetarian myself. I've been a vegetarian for, I don't know, forever, 40, I don't know, long, 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 long time. And when I was in South Africa, I ate meat because it was offered to me from people who had so little, and to offer me the most expensive protein they could get their hands on. They weren't going to get beans for the person visiting them in the township the way we did. They're going to try to afford chicken, put their money together and get chicken. So boy, did we get chicken. It's so clear to me. It feels so obvious to me that in that setting, you eat it with great gratitude. You eat the deer, eat the chicken, eat the thing. Of course you do. That's what love looks like right then, with great appreciation, with great love. Then it's communion. There's something you understand about what's happening there, right? Life feeds on life, and in this circumstance, this is the thing to do. This is the thing that feels really, really good. I'm talking about social norms and being polite, but I'm also talking about a spiritual principle, right? Don't be too holy to eat the deer doesn't mean you have to eat it. It also doesn't mean you don't need to eat it. It's a state of heart. It's about participation. What his teacher was pointing out to him, and what he was then pointing out to me is, you're putting yourself above your life. Do you feel how you're just notching up? You're ratcheting up. You're sitting on a little shelf. You're sitting on a little shelf above your life, and you're wrapped in you're wrapped in plastic because you're so precious. You're a little too good, aren't you, for your humanity, for your dirt, for your deer. A little too precious, right? For your humanity and the sweat and the blood and ugh, your friends, anger, relationship, worldliness, dirt. Can you feel it? These are the things that spirituality, when it's misunderstood, has been at war with forever. It creates a horrible split in us. Our preciousness and our mundaneness, our holiness and our everydayness, our spiritual being and our human being. Oh, of course we all do it. So the goal isn't to not do it. The goal is just to see it when we do it. Oh, I notice I'm getting really precious about the Roxu. Oh, I notice that I'm wanting to skip the deer. Oh, I notice that I'm not wanting to. However, it shows up in your life, right? I notice I got upset when the chanting was off. Pitch in the zendo. I noticed I got judgmental, right? And that Okesa, the robe was too wrinkled, mine or someone else's, right? I noticed I got judgmental when I saw the mudra ugh, collapse and get floppy in the person across the room. Just notice it. I'm getting precious. I'm getting scared. I'm getting constricted about the rule. And I don't want to include that fear, right? I don't want to include my judgment in my awareness. And so I just imagine if that person's mudra was correct, I wouldn't have this feeling. What's wrong with them anyway? Set up straight. Iron your iron your okesa, you know? And that's helpful advice. That might be skillful to say sit up straight. It might be skillful to admonish a student, iron your okesa. That's correct. It's treating something that's powerfully symbolic with great respect. You should. That's correct. But I can feel that the energy that can come from in me can be a loving energy that wants to connect and not me needing to be too holy. Right? It's okay. It's okay. My humanity is okay. The dirt is okay. So it's not about caring less, having a little bit more of a rugged Buddha, It's actually about caring a little more, allowing ourselves to feel our caring more. And that means all of our caring, all of our feelings. Caring is just a sense of wanting to connect, right? Wanting to be a little less distant from. I care about that ecosystem. I care about that issue. I care about that person. I care about that experience. What is Buddha if it's not just engaged, compassionate, wise connection, non-separateness with everything, right? Of course, it's a state of caring. And yet we're told over and over in our Zen tradition, it freely descends into hell without resistance all the time. That beautiful lotus that we use as our metaphor, one of our many metaphors for enlightenment, for the purity of our Buddha nature, is in no way ever understood or taught to be separate from the stem that carries it up through the cold, dark water that connects it all the way down to the very, very bottom, and its roots going deep down, anchoring it into the mud. That's one beautiful living organism connecting the air to the earth through the water. Powerful metaphor for us, right? But it's very important that we understand it isn't just this blossom separate from everything else. It's this blossom in the midst of the air, in the midst of being connected to water down through the stem into the earth. It affirms, it affirms, it affirms. It's very, very, very important. It isn't too precious. It's not at all precious. Everything is precious. So, as Thich Nhat Hanh, the great master, says, no mud, no lotus. Nothing holy means everything is holy, right? No mud, no lotus. Like, please, he saw this in all of his students over all those many years. My teachers saw it. I see it in myself all the time. I see it in people that I work with. I just want to be the flower. I just want to follow the rules. I want it to be neat and I want it to be organized and I want it to be clear and I want it to be glass and I want it to be on a shelf and I want it to be perfect. I understand that. I really do. I want our little tribe's rules to be precious. And you can kind of feel what happens. Maybe my little tribe's rules are a little more precious than yours. Maybe my unwrinkled okesa is just a little bit more Buddha's robe than yours that has the wrinkles. Now I have a problem. My caring has become something else. It's very human, right? So, Jack Kornfield, the Buddhist teacher, he's a Vipassana, an insight teacher, still teaching, I think, in California, if I understand correctly, brought to the fore or made popular the Golden Buddha story. It had been around before him, but the story you can look it up if you want. Search it up. The Golden Buddha story of um, Laos, Cambodia. Maybe it was in Cambodia. I forget where it was. The center of this little village having a beautiful stone kind of clay Buddha at the center of the village, and at some point, through all sorts of circumstances, a crack forming in this Buddha, and the people discovering that it was actually the clay was actually covering gold. The original statue, the statue inside was gold, solid gold. Um, I have no idea the size or weight or value of this object. It's infinitely valuable. But the theory was at some point, probably, it's a pretty good theory. At some point, probably the village was under immediate danger of being invaded, and they have this gigantic, really tremendously beautiful. I mean, again, search it up, look at the images of it. It's in a temple. And I forget the name of the temple. I wasn't planning on telling the story, but it's fantastically beautiful. Even the images of it, I mean, you just get emotional. It's so, 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 so beautiful. Um, the theory is like, well, it's too heavy to move and we don't have enough time. Oh my God, they're going to find it. They're going to melt it down. They're going to do things that invaders have a tendency to do, which is defile things, right? Things that are not precious for our tribe become not precious. That's the problem with something being holy. That's why Zen says nothing holy. It doesn't literally mean nothing holy. It means everything is equally holy, and therefore holy doesn't matter. The word, you can pitch it because you don't need it. Everything is of infinite value. But you can sort of see the trap we fall into. If it's holy, then there's a not holy. If there's a precious, then there's a not precious. If there's a spiritual and lofty, then there's a sacred, right? If there's a blossom, then there's a, right? So you feel how we're always wanting to split, split, split. So, because this statue is way, way, way too heavy and way too difficult to move, and we got to go, somebody had the brilliant idea, let's cover it with mud. Let's just cover it with mud. Then they're going to think it's of little value. Hopefully, ignore it. We can come back and get it. Who knows what the end of that story is? Who knows if that's even the reasoning? But it makes a lot of sense. Because when it was rediscovered in the 40s or 50s, it was many hundreds of years old, and it had already survived many hundreds of rainfalls and summer heat and all that kind of stuff. It had been long forgotten. And when they realized, oh my God, this thing isn't a clay Buddha, it's a golden Buddha covered in clay. Wow, what a revelation. And what a metaphor, which is why Jack Kornfield offers it to us. I can't imagine in that circumstance, the invaders are coming and we have to go. I have an idea. Let's cover the golden Buddha with mud. I can imagine letting the voice arise in me, had I been there, going, you can't cover our Buddha in mud. Like you're literally taking the most precious symbol that we have as Buddhists, right? This perfect thing and covering it in mud. Like we dust it every day to make sure that it's pristine. You're describing doing exactly the opposite of everything we have done. Covered in mud is the opposite impulse. And yet, of course, that's what saved it. The Buddha was covered in mud for hundreds of years and it was rescued. It was never melted down. It was never destroyed, right? And so my question is that Buddha, that beautiful gold Buddha, was covered in mud for centuries. Was it defiled? Was it defiled? Of course it wasn't. Of course it wasn't. I'm glad they weren't too precious about that Buddha. I'm glad they were brave enough to say, yeah, covered in mud. That's a great idea. It's a great idea. Upaya. Skillful means right now means we're going to cover that thing in mud. There's also a similar story in China, and I can't tell you the name of the temple. And who knows whether these stories are apocryphal or and they just end up getting included in story collections or if they're true. But the monastery was quite north up on a mountain, which they oftentimes were. And during an especially harsh winter, isolated many, many miles from any place, um, cut off by the snowfall. And in the cold was becoming increasingly dangerous. And they ran out of firewood and started burning furniture to stay alive, to keep heat. Started burning tables, started burning like what else in this place is made of wood that we can burn to stay alive. And the abbot suggested the huge statue of the Buddha that had been made of wood. And in the story, of course, the monks are like, "No, this is our precious object. We're too holy to eat the deer. That's the Buddha." And some version of the story says the abbot said, "Right now it's wood. It is made in the shape of Buddha. That's fine, but don't be too precious. Don't let your Buddha be made of glass. Don't let your practice be so rigid. Don't let it be so precious. Please." Obviously, life is what needs to be sustained here. So you cut it up, put it in the fire, stay it's alive. Is that a defilement? I would say no. I would say the choice I made that I felt I had to when I was in Africa around the little robes and the little rules I had to follow and the things I didn't. I don't consider that defiling. It makes sense to me that when we first come to practice, we're covered in mud. Our whole lives are on fire. That's usually what motivates us to come to practice. Our lives are dirty and they're confusing and they're dark. They're opaque. They're hard to see. They're hard to get out of. The heaviness is obvious. The suffering is obvious. Most of us come to want to get away from that. I understand that. It makes perfect sense. I realize that I'm mud and I want to be a lotus, right? It's going to take us quite a while to realize there's no reason to leave the mud behind, but it takes a while to get to that. At the beginning, it makes sense that we kind of want everything to be precious and perfect. I get it, right? We reach for the light when we're identified with the dark. We reach for the pure when we imagine that we're something less than pure. And that's not actually true. The impurity is part of the Buddha. The mud is part of the Buddha. The mud is part of the lotus. It's okay. It's okay. So, um, the last place I'll take this before I wrap up here is back to where I started, which is when I found my Roxu. I just hadn't seen in a few months. I had this memory come back. And I'm 15 odd years older than I was uh, when I went on that first pilgrimage to South Africa. And what I look back on now and what I can see very clearly now that I couldn't have seen then was I was really, really, really wanting to follow the rules exactly because I was in training. And part of that, I really, really want to do this right. Part of that was out of great respect, a beautiful aspiration, right? To wear the robes with respect, to um, make my teachers happy, to do the thing that I was asked without resistance, to be a good student. There's a beauty in that. There's nothing wrong with that. There's a humility there. It's okay, right? I have a big heart for him 15 years ago. But what I can also see is there was a huge shadow there that I didn't see at that time. It took me a while to catch it. I was really scared. That's what was motivating that. I got to follow the rule. I'm so scared of what'll happen if I don't, right? I'm not talking magical thinking. I wasn't something's going to happen from the cosmos. There's going to be some sort of retribution or something. No, no, no. That was never what I was taught, and that's not how Zen thinks. The fear was internal. What would it mean about me if I was sloppy? What would it mean about me if I ate the deer? What would it mean about me if there was mud? What would it mean about me if I had to cover my gold with clay? What would that mean about me? Can you see the can you see the break there? Can you see where the delusion kind of sneaks in? I don't want to be with that. If I don't want to be with that feeling, I don't want to be with that fear. I don't want to have that shame. That must mean there's a part of me that believes in that narrative. What'll it mean about you? It doesn't mean anything about me. How could it? That's ridiculous. But the fear doesn't recognize the ridiculous of fear's own narrative. That's our job as meditators. When we sit long enough to pay attention to our thoughts, to pay attention to our feelings, mindfulness of emotion leads to mindfulness of thought consciousness in the original model in the Satipatthana Sutta. Mindfulness of body leads to mindfulness of breath, leads to mindfulness of emotion, right? Leads to mindfulness of impulse and thought consciousness. And you see how they're all related. And you start realizing what you already know, which is when I'm feeling scared, I have really scary thoughts. And those thoughts keep that feeling alive, they juice it. And my really, really scary thoughts create the feeling of fear and they juice it. And those two just kind of spin, right? Samsara. Yeah, of course they do. This is how it works. Got it. But boy, I've got to practice, don't I? I'm a mindfulness practitioner. I'm a Zen student. I'm a somebody who watches whatever form your path takes. Oh, I see it. I get it. I understand how that works. And I understand that if I can hold that emotion, if I can literally just let myself breathe with it for even a short amount of time, I'm talking 30 seconds, right? I can see so much more clearly the story. But fear has a story. Anger has a story. Confusion has a story. Shame has a story. They all do. Even non-afflictive emotions have a story. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just seeing it. Oh, I see it. We get so much calmer, so much less reactive when we're allowing ourselves to feel the feeling we've been trying to avoid. You stop avoiding it. You turn toward it. You just turn toward it, right? You already have it. It's already there. Turning away, fighting it is just creating more suffering, right? It's already there. Turning toward it is a yes. There's the affirmation, right? If you're falling, dive, as the old saying goes. If you're already falling, dive. Go with it. Right? If the dog is chasing you, stop and whistle for it, as Mark Twain says. Great Zen teacher, right? Can you feel that? Like I had a belief, I had ideas about what a good student does and what it might mean about me if I wasn't a good student that was keeping me stuck with a very, very, very precious little, specific little, fear-based little, fundamentalist little rule. I wouldn't break it because of what I thought it might mean about me. No, 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 no. When I was able to breathe with that fierce little and go, oh, that, of course, that explains the fear. But when you see the falsehood, you go, oh, well, that's not true. There's not much there to juice the fear anymore. It starts to fade. You can see it more clearly. I'll be fine. We can cover our Buddha in clay. It might help it to survive. It's okay. We can welcome the dog. It's okay. It's been chasing. It's okay to have the deer. I ate the sausage. It was sausage. I forget ostrich. At one point, I had ostrich. I forget stuff that was served to me and chicken. Chicken in the township. Chicken, right? I'm so grateful that that was a moment of a non-glass Buddha. That Buddha was much, much, much more weathered, much more earth affirming, much more flexible, much bigger, much less reactive. That's okay. So that's all I'm really offering you. Just notice, just notice the places where the rule following grabs you. Just notice it. Notice the times when you imagine that um, your altar, your robe, your practice, your chanting, your zazen posture, your devotion to whatever it is, just notice it when it gets a little grabby. Notice it when it gets a little rigid. Notice it when it gets a little glass-like. It's okay, but just be the one who notices it, right? We don't need to get rid of any of that stuff. I didn't need to get rid of my fear. I still don't need to get rid of our fear. You don't need to get rid of your fear. You need it. You don't like to feel it, but without it, you'd have no impulse to safety. You'd have no impulse to safety. Holy cow. You need that. Oh, yeah, you're right. I guess I do need that. And we don't like to feel our shame. You don't want to feel your shame. I don't want to feel my shame. I know why. But without shame, no boundaries, no rules. That's also related to safety, I guess. Right? But part of our conscience, no shame, no conscience. Wow. You don't want to get rid of it. So if you thought that was the mud that you're here to get rid of, that you're here to separate from, see what happens. See what happens to that water lily, that lotus, when you disconnect it from the stem that goes through the water, that goes into the mud. When you disconnect it from those things, see what happens to that blossom. You already know what's going to happen to that blossom. You already know what happens to your practice when it's disconnected from your suffering. Doesn't work. We are not here to get rid of that stuff. We are not here to get rid of it. If we're here to just get rid of that stuff, then our enlightenment is so thin. It's so breakable. It's way too precious, right? No, 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 no. You can feel the attachment there. It's a long-standing, I don't know. It feels like a long-standing joke to me anyway, in the Zen community, just because I've heard people tell versions of this story. Again, my teacher included, and certainly in my experience, I've borne this out 100 times of, yes, I went to the retreat, or I did the session. I did the session and I had a big experience. Oh, it was fabulous. I had a big Kensho experience, a big expansion, right? Some sort of big awakening. And I left the retreat just flying. Wow, everything was luminous. Everything was lit up from within, and I was non-separate from all of us. This is beautiful. This isn't me making fun of that experience. It's a deeply sacred experience, and it's really, really beautiful. It's really important. I honor all of that. The joke part comes in. I felt so great, and I was just unbreakable. I was just Buddha. I was connected to everything. Everything was so light. Everything was so beautiful. And so I called my mom, and then everybody laughed because you go, right. Right. You call your family, you talk to your mom, you talk to your dad, you talk to your wife, you talk to your kid, you talk to your boss, you got to go back. The drive back from session sooner or later. And the joke is, and we're not laughing at ourselves, we're laughing with ourselves. My humanity showed up. For just a little while, I felt completely separate from my stalk. I felt completely separate from my mud. I just wasn't those things. I was nothing but love and light. It's called the heaven realm in the Buddhist cosmology, the six realms, right? One of them is the heaven realm, and it's very clearly discussed as this is a realm of suffering. The realm you want to be in is the human realm. Goes against our natural instinct, right? We're thinking, well, heaven, obviously you want heaven as opposed to human. Of course, duh. And this is standard issue religious thought. Clearly, you're born into the human realm, you think it sucks, and your goal is to get to the heaven realm. Uh-uh. Here it's no, because what happens when you're in the heaven realm? Just what that story illustrates. I'm having a really, really wonderful experience. That's nice. You're having a great experience. That's nice. But it's very, very fragile. And all it wants to do is perpetuate itself. It just grabs onto itself. It clings to itself. Don't harsh my buzz. If it can't include your humanity, it's sure as hell not enlightenment. Right? That's why we laugh and go, oh yeah. So then I called my mom and the house of cards came down again. That's fine. That's fine. That's absolutely fine, actually. It's quite beautiful. Because you just look at it and go, oh, I get it. Now I'm reconnected again. Now, when my irritation shows up during that phone call with my mom, I can go, oh, irritation, you're included. It's okay. Come on, Mud. Come on back in. I'm sorry I tried to cut you off. I misunderstood. It's fine. Right? If we're not careful, compassion dies. And if there is nothing else that is at the heart of the Zen tradition, all of Mahayana Buddhism really, but the Zen tradition, it's compassion. It's our highest ideal for a reason. We are not here to cut off from anything. So making our Buddha glass, making our practice precious, getting too attached, getting too constricted, right? Just means we have some suffering in us that needs our attention. That's all it means. It doesn't mean we're bad. It doesn't mean we've failed. 15 years ago, me didn't fail. He didn't fail. He wasn't bad. There was just something he didn't see. And then when he did see it, I went, oh, that's what that is. And I'm grateful because I was shown that. I had help. All right. I had teachers who said, oh, it sounds like you're really, really scared of breaking the rule. What's that about? Right? We're here to be with suffering. That's what compassion means. You're here to be with that thing. Fall in love with it. What else would Buddha do? Right? What else would enlightenment be? Thich Nhat Hanh says, however, this is how he translates the first Bodhisattva vow. This is how he says it. I like his translation. However inexhaustible the states of suffering are, I vow to touch them with patience and love. Wow. That's Thich Nhat Hanh's translation of the first Bodhisattva vow. He changed just one idea in that when he translated it. And that one change he made, it comes from a profound insight. I hold his teaching in very, very high regard. The normal translation is beings are numberless, vowing to freedom. Or the number of suffering beings is without number. I will set all of them free. Right. And the second vow is delusions are inexhaustible, vowing to extinguish them. Or the ways in which I can delude myself and get this thing wrong, the ways in which I'm going to fall into delusion and ignorance are infinite, but I vow never to, or I vow not to. Can you feel that the language, the original translations, the language creates a separation that Thich Nhat Hanh in his translation is refusing to put in there? Because the way he translated, however inexhaustible the states of suffering are, pretty standard first part. His second part is, I vow to touch them with patience and love. Now, the paradox built into all of this is when something is touched and met and held with patience and love, it isn't suffering anymore. It might just be pain. Pain might still be present, but Buddha never said, well, I'm here to make your pain go away. That ain't going to happen. Pain is part of the deal. But the fighting against the pain, the resistance to the pain, the wanting the pain to be different, the constriction that happens when we, right? There, dukkha. Now we have Buddhism. Now we have something we can work with. That's suffering. That's a very different deal. So the paradox is, of course, when I meet my pain with acceptance and love and curiosity, he says patience and love, I'm not suffering. I'm not resisting it. I'm not fighting it. I'm not needing it to be different. I'm not saying, screw you, state of suffering. Get out of here. Get out of here, mud. Get out of here, clay. Get out of here. I'm not. I'm refusing. I'm turning toward it. I'm already falling. I'm diving. There you are. I affirm you. It's okay. Poof. Suffering ends. But we still end up at the very same place. Thich Nhat Hanh's translation takes us to the same place as the ancient translation. But his skillful means, his upaya, right, is I'm going to put the instruction in instead of just saying the aspiration, which has not changed in 2000 years, 2,500 years, I guess. Depends on when you think the Bodhisattva vow started. Doesn't matter. I'm going to put in that subtle instruction so we see the bridge to go from suffering to pain is just a touch. If I touch it, if I touch that pain, if I touch that suffering, if I touch that life, if I touch that anything with patience and love, the resistance isn't created. The dukkha doesn't show up. So when dukkha does show up, when your suffering does show up, when your resistance shows up, when your judgment shows up, when your crankiness about the robe shows up, when your resistance to the deer shows up, whatever, it's going to show up for you today. Just look for it. Look for your preciousness. It'll show up. Look for your glass Buddha. It's fine. Of course, it's going to show up. You're a human. You have a body. You have an ego. You're alive. It's going to show up. Of course, notice that it is there and see that. That seeing. There you are. That seeing is the touch he's talking about. Oh, I see you. Oh, there you are. I can be patient with that part of myself. I can just be patient with it. There it is. It's part of my conditioning. It's okay. Poof. Dukkha just disappeared. There isn't resistance there. That's the magic trick of Zen. It's beautiful. It's internal, entirely internal, but that's the mechanism that changes everything. So that's the end of the Buddha made of glass. Glass Buddhas are lovely too. Oh dear. I appreciate your attention. I hope these little offerings are of use. I'll remind you that if there's something in this talk that speaks to you, moves you, helps you make a connection, that's you. That's your wisdom. You're the one who knew that. I'm just reminding you of it. I don't have anything that I can give you, but I just kind of record these. I write them out and I record them. I do my best to follow my heart and riff the best I can in the moment to try to offer something to you. But I promise there isn't something I have that I'm giving. It isn't. That's not how Zen works. How this really works is you recognize, oh yeah, I see that. There's you. That's you. That's you being a good student. Then the teacher does appear. And if it's a talk, great. And if it's the spring day, great. And if it's the rock suit that you find after many, many years and a memory comes back and you help make a connection, great. Right? Buddha's everywhere. So thank you for your attention. It's wonderful to be here again with you. More to come soon. Okay.